Theme 3, Session 5. I've given you a cursory statement on the subject of semantic precision. To understand that brief discussion of the subject, I claim you will get more out of that than you could be by reading a dozen books of semantics. What the so-called semanticists do not comprehend is the part of that is significant, and that's the precision part, the semantic precision. We learned this concept from the physical sciences. Without it, there is no science, because everyone is in the dark as to what everybody is talking about all the time, on all subjects, until you have precision. Now, as I promised you, I'm going to be coming to a discussion on absolute morality. Even more than that, I will discuss absolute rightness as a total concept applied to volition. Sounds crazy, right? Absolute rightness. What does it mean? However, in order to do that, I want to reiterate this concept of property that we discussed at the beginning. And since there's a number of people, I'm sure, that were not present, didn't hear the definition, I want to reiterate for their benefit the meaning of property in order to prepare the way for absolute morality. The entire science of volition is structured upon one single definition of property. Property is the individual volitional being's life and all non-procreative derivatives thereof. You might take note of the fact that it's not a definition of property that you will find in a dictionary. You look up property in any, small, short, long dictionary, you will not find this definition. In fact, someone might even say, well, this is not property. We mean one thing by property, they say. This is a departure from other concept of property that had come down to us. Historically, in fact, we have failed to identify the exact nature of property. We have failed to precisely answer the question, what is property? Adam Smith, read Adam Smith. And so individual volitional beings generate property. Property is a product of individual volitional action. Individuals take actions that bring property into existence. Property, your property, is simply any derivative of life, excluding your children. Children are not your property. And property begins with life itself, called primordial property, the biological derivative of life. Who is the owner of your life, your primordial property? You are. If you do not own your own life, then who does? If someone other than you is the owner of your life, we have a name for that. It's called slavery. The first derivative of your life, or first derivatives of your life, are actions, thoughts, beliefs, ideas, innovations. We call it primary property, the intangible derivatives of life. And the second derivatives of life, the tangible derivatives, food, clothing, hammers, automobiles, pop-up toasters. It's important to emphasize when I say property, I mean more than just the tangible things. Because if every time I use the term property, your mind says tables, hammers, automobiles, hair dryers, diamond rings, yachts. Every time I say property, you think tangible, you'll miss the entire point of this course. Secondary property is the least important form of property anyhow, for reasons which I will discuss later. Building upon the definition of property, I gave you a definition of stealing, which is the seizure of an individual's property without his permission. Or more simply stating the concept, stealing is simply the taking of man's property without his permission. Man is generic for either sex. You cannot steal from women or from men, the same thing. The definition of stealing depends upon the prior definition of property. The object of theft is always property. The only thing that is possible to steal is property. And again, to reiterate some of the consequences of theft. If a thief steals your automobile, you have been enslaved. The thief now enjoys the benefit of your automobile, not you. You're not voluntarily serving the thief. Therefore, you are involuntarily serving the thief. And so the thief of any property always places the victim into a state of involuntary servitude. Therefore, all thieves are enslavers. All thieves are slave masters. I gave you an illustration of this. The chemist has his formula stolen without his permission. It is sold to a textile firm for $500,000. Even to the chemist, he does not have a chain around his neck. He is in a state of involuntary servitude. His ideas being used without his permission, this is his primary property, and he is just as much a slave as if he were in a prison. I give you the definition of slavery, the control of the individual's property without his permission. We'll come back to the subject of slavery later. I will just make one statement on the subject. Slavery represents the optimization of incompetence. Therefore, in addition, I'll come to the subject of morality in a moment. That's what I want to discuss now. Absolute morality, a major subject, a seemingly impossible subject to derive on any rational basis. How can you determine if a man's actions are moral on an absolute basis? Moral on an absolute basis. What does moral versus immoral means? Some volitional actions are moral, some are immoral. The question is how you can make a distinction between the two with precision. Can you identify absolute morality versus relative morality? Now, one of the immediate problems we encounter in dealing with this question, at least on the scientific basis, involves the conflict that arises between individuals over what is good. For example, what is good action? Or what is good music? If there is agreement on the subject, what do you think? What is good music? Jace Nelson liked certain chamber pieces from Baroque period, like Bach's Concerto for Two Violins and Orchestra and Antonio Vivaldi's well-known Four Seasons. However, the innovator of this course, Professor Galambos, would call this bad. All of this indicates something that you must have recognized long ago. And that is what each individual calls good is relative to his frame of reference. Good is whatever an individual voluntarily chooses or prefers. Good means any phenomenon, process, action, event an individual voluntarily chooses, condition that an individual voluntarily chooses or prefers. To illustrate, let's say a man with 3 shirts considers the transition of going from 3 to 4 shirts. All right, most men would call this transaction from 3 to 4 good, especially if you live in a society where it's common to wear shirts. To another man, if you live on an island with no shirts, you will not care. To another man, one of the highest concepts of good would be to knock down 10 sticks 12 times in succession for a perfect score of 300. Such a man might spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to knock down 10 sticks with a ball 12 times in a row. Am I right? Yep. To another man, good is to own one each of every hubcap of every automobile, foreign and domestic. Where do you find those hubcaps? They're all over. Parking lots are filled with them. And if you see one, you don't have it in your collection, you look around and pull out a screwdriver and pop it off, stick it under your coat and run home and tuck it on the wall with the rest of your hubcap collection. However, maybe you have your 1941 Cadillac parked out there, and you come out and 3 of the hubcaps are missing. If that's your 1941 Cadillac and those are your hubcaps, you probably is remote that you will call this good. The 3 missing hubcaps, I mean. And it may not be the easiest thing to replace a 1941 hubcap, am I right? So there is a disagreement about what's good, but we will go into heart of that next time. Until then.